Good morning, guys. Today we're going to review our chapter 9 on data analysis and just talk about everything we've talked about this chapter, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about is the different vocabulary that we worked with this chapter. So the first vocabulary word is data. So data is numbers or symbols that show information. So anything we collected, whether it was in a survey or a tally chart or a bar graph, that information or numbers that are shown is the data. That's what you collected and that's what you use to answer questions. You answer questions about the data. All right. The next word is survey. Okay, a survey is to collect data by asking people the same question. So one of the ways we collect data is using a survey. So you would survey people. For example, this first graph up here talks about the favorite time of day. So you would go around and you'd ask everybody the same question. You would walk up to someone and you would say, is your favorite time of the day morning, afternoon, or evening? And then whatever they answer, you would put a little tally mark beside, and then when you're completely done, you would total it up. Okay? Same with this one. You would ask them their favorite pet, if it was a cat, dog, or maybe mouse or a gerbil, whatever that is, and then mark it and count the tally when you're done. Okay? Next, we have picture graphs. Now, picture graphs are graphs that have different pictures to show the information collected. So it's still a way to represent data and in a way that we can organize it, but they just specifically use pictures. It's also known as a pictograph. We didn't really talk about that in our chapter, but it's pretty easy to tell. Picture graph and pictograph, it's just a quicker way to write it, but it's just another thing that it's called. But as you can see in our picture graphs, each item is represented with a picture. So if someone said that their favorite toy was a soccer ball, was a ball, they drew a ball to show that that was their vote. Something that they also have is which we're going to talk about here in a second, is the key. Remember, it shows what each picture represents. Okay, so it says this whole pencil represents 2 students. So you can tell that their half pencil is just 1. All right, so like I was just saying, the key tells what or how many each symbol stands for. So like I said, was just talking about, each picture is worth whatever the key says it is. So for example, in the last graph, it said that each picture was worth 2 votes. Okay, so we had to know that a pencil was worth 2. In this one, each picture is just worth 1, so we know that each time we count a picture, we can just say 1. We just count by 1. So how many people like the beach? 1, 2, 3. We don't have to skip count by any other number because the key tells us that it's 1. Something we didn't really talk about, you don't really necessarily need to know at this point, but going forward you will need to know, is another thing that a key might show you is what bars represent. So we have only been working with single bar graphs, but sometimes bar graphs have 2 or more bars, and the key tells you what they represent. So in this case, they asked boys and girls separately which sport they liked the best. And they said that the yellow is going to be girls. So every time you see a yellow bar, those are what the girls voted. And every time you see a red bar, it says boys. So that's what the boys voted. So instead of doing everyone together, they did them separately. Kind of interesting, but that again helps us see, the key helps us tell the difference, helps us tell what the symbol stands for. All right, our next kind of graph was a bar graph, and this is simply a graph that uses bars to show data. So in the way that the picture graph uses pictures, bar graphs use bars. So remember, our bar graphs can go either horizontally, like this one up here, or vertically, like this one here, but they show the same information. So still you have a title telling us what the information is showing. In this case, shows us how many swimming laps they did. In this case, it's the favorite type of music. You have a side labeling, each side labeling, and then a number side to show the amount. So in this case, there's different students, so those names, they tell us they're students, and how many laps they did. Down here, the different things that are labeled are the different kinds of movies, as we know, and then this is the amount of people that said that those were their favorite. Okay, so the bar graph just has those different key pieces. All right, our last kind is a line plot. Okay, we won't have to worry about tables too much in this case, but a line plot is a graph that used to show how often a certain number occurs in data. Now remember, this is just with amounts, okay, just numbers. So for example, our first one says books read in November. So this is the amount of books read in November. So someone read 1 book, 3 people read 2 books, 4 people read 3 books, and 2 people read 4 books. Same thing down here, candy bars, and it just says the number of candy bars, hopefully eaten, although I don't know, there's some of those that are a lot up in there. Someone ate none, someone ate 1, someone ate 2, 3 people had 3, nobody had 4, 4 people had 5, 2 people had 6, and 1 person had 7, and it's kind of cut off, but 2 people had 8. So line plots just show us how often a certain number occurs in data. And the thing with line plots is whenever you're analyzing line plots, you have to really pay attention to whether they're asking you about which number it occurs or the amount. Okay, that can be the only thing that's sort of tricky, and we're going to do some example questions, so I'll talk about it when I'm there as well. But that's the only thing with line plots. And just making sure that those X's are always lined up if you're making them. If you're reading it, obviously it's already taken care of. But that way it's easier for someone who's reading it to see the amounts. Because if I had made all my X's really small for this one, and if the 4 only went up to the same height as 3, they might look the same, but this one actually has more because it has 4 and this one has 3. So it's just another thing about having to be neat so that it's easy to read and understand. Okay, we're going to go through some practice problems here that look sort of like what we would have as a study guide, which you will do later today. So just going to walk through these. This is our example. I'll go ahead and do it as well, but it says, look at the tally chart. Which pet do most students have? So we're looking for most, that's our key word. So we want the largest group. Okay, so we're going to come over to our tally chart. We're going to first see which one has the most, which right here is looking like this number here, 8 has the most. And I'm going to come over and see that it's a dog. So my answer would be dog. Okay, very good job. So look at the picture graph below. It shows vehicles in a parking lot. How many motorcycles are in the parking lot? Okay. First thing I want to do when I look at this picture graph is look at my key and see how much these pictures are worth. Okay, so it comes down here, it says key. Each picture is 1 vehicle. So I know that when I count up the number of motorcycles, I know that I'm going to count each vote as 1. Okay, now it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but this first column, remember, that just shows what each column is. So that one does not count, okay? It's usually a little better colored in. It's probably just how I copied it on the screen. But so I'm not going to count this first column. So then starting here, remember I'm counting by ones, 1 motorcycle, 2 motorcycles. So there's 2 motorcycles in the parking lot. So I'd come down here and I'd shade in number 2, or the 2. Look at the bar graph below. It shows how students voted when asked if they like books, movies, or music most. How many students voted? Okay, all this question wants to know is how many students all together voted. Okay, so all I have to do is count up the different amounts of students all together. All right, so we have, and you could do this a couple different ways if you wanted to just go through and count by 1 and just count them all. That's a perfectly fine strategy. You can also use the numbers down here and just then add just those 3 numbers together. Might be a little bit quicker. That's what I'm going to do. So I have my first column is 7, okay? My next one is 8, so I know 7 plus 8 is 15, okay? And then my last one is 4. Adding 4 to 15 is just 19. Oh, I must have done this incorrectly. So we got, oh, I'm sorry, the first one is only 6. So we have 6 plus 7, it's weirdly labeled, plus 4. So say, look, that's a good example of, sometimes you're not going to get that right answer right away, and you're allowed to go back and get it. It's a good, and I knew that it wasn't right because my answer wasn't down at the bottom. So even teachers make mistakes, and this is good for you to see and learn because it's okay. I don't expect it to be perfect all the time. So we're coming through, we're saying 6 plus 7 is 13, plus 4 is 17. So our answer is going to be 17, not 19, because that was incorrect. So our answer is 17. Cats would be annoyed. All right, number 3. Look at the bar graph. It shows the number of animals in a barn. How many sheep and cows are in the barn? Okay, so we want to look at sheep and cows, and remember that means we're adding together. that they're in the barn together. All right, so we want cows. Same thing. We have come down here. We can see that there's 8 cows. Okay, and then how many sheep? Come down here. We can see that there's 5. So 8 plus 5 is 13. Okay, so that's our 13 right there. So that would be our answer. All right, final thing is a line plot. Okay, we've kind of talked about the different sort of kinds. We've had a tally mark, we've had a picture graph, also known as a pictograph. We have 2 bar graphs, both horizontal in this case. And the last thing we're going to work with is a line plot. Okay, so use the line plot to answer the questions. All right, so there's 2 questions about this line plot. So first I want to look at it before I even ask the questions. I want to see what it's telling me. So it's showing me the number of instruments students play. Okay, so now I know that this graph is showing me the number of instruments that students play. So how many students played 2 instruments? Okay, this is one of those cases where I won't have to know if I'm answering about the x's or if I'm answering about the number that the x's go with. So in this case, I'm answering the number about the amount of x's with the number 2 because it wants to know how many students played 2 instruments. So I'm going up here to the 2 where it shows 2 instruments and I see how many x's are there. And there's only one person who plays 2 instruments. Okay, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to fill in that 1 because there's just one person with that number 2. What is the most common number of instruments students play? So in this case, we want to use the x's to find the answer, and then the number at the bottom is going to be our answer. Okay, so those are the 2 different types of questions I talked about earlier that they gave us in this case. So what is the most common number of instruments students play? We're going to come up here, see which one has the most or which one is the tallest, who has the most x's, and that would be this column right here, and that is over the number 1, so our answer would be number 1. Okay, so that's how we kind of go through those. Always double check your work. As you know, I made a mistake too, and that's just how it is. We just have to keep working and try again. We're all risk takers, even me, yes, even the teacher. We all have to be risk takers together.